She had always been the kind of person who did not know how to back down. Growing up in a small town where girls were expected to be soft and polite, she learned early that the world had a narrow box for women. Her name was Sarah, and from the time she could walk, she wanted to fight. Not because she was angry, but because she loved the feeling of her body moving with purpose. Her father, a former boxer, saw it in her eyes. He built her a punching bag from old canvas and hung it from a tree in their backyard. Neighbors would stop and stare at the little girl with her hair in braids, throwing hooks and jabs until her knuckles were raw. By the time she was 12, she was secretly entering local martial arts tournaments, lying about her age just to compete. Boys would laugh at first, but the laughter always died when she swept their legs from under them. Life, however, had its own way of testing people. Her mother fell ill when Sarah was 15, and the family lost everything to medical bills. The fighting stopped. She took jobs cleaning houses and waiting tables, her dreams buried under the weight of survival. But the fire never went out. It just slept. When she turned 22, her mother passed away, and Sarah found herself alone with nothing but a broken heart and a pair of old boxing gloves. She moved to the city and walked into a mixed martial arts gym called The Forge. The place smelled of sweat and old blood. The men inside looked at her like she was lost. The head coach, a retired fighter named Mac, told her gently that women's classes were on Tuesdays. She looked him in the eye and said she was not there for women's classes. Mac laughed and pointed to a heavy bag. He said if she could last 10 minutes without crying, he would think about it. She lasted 45. By the end of that year, she was the gym's secret weapon. Nobody talked about her outside those walls, but everyone inside knew that the quiet woman with the scarred knuckles was something special. The military world was a different kind of beast. Sarah never planned to enter it, but life has a strange way of dragging people toward their destiny. A local charity event invited her gym to put on a demonstration for veterans. And that was where she first saw Commander Eric Vance. He was a SEAL commander with 20 years of service, 3 tours in combat zones, and a reputation that stretched across every special operations community in the country. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall, with shoulders like a doorframe and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He had never lost a hand-to-hand fight in his career. People said he could snap a man's arm before the man even knew what happened. Eric was polite, even charming, but there was something cold behind his smile. He shook Sarah's hand after her demonstration and squeezed just a little too hard. He said, "Cute moves, sweetheart. But real fighting is different." Sarah did not react. She had learned years ago that men like Eric needed an audience. They fed on the admiration of others, on the fear in people's eyes. She simply smiled and walked away. But the words stayed with her. Over the next few months, she trained harder than ever. She added weightlifting to her routine, ran hills before sunrise, and studied military combatives until she knew every weakness in the system. Eric, meanwhile, had heard about her through the grapevine. A woman who trained with special forces. That annoyed him. He started making comments at charity dinners, at veteran events, in front of reporters. He said women had no place in close combat. He said biology was destiny. He said he would bet his reputation that no woman could last 2 minutes with him in a cage. The media picked it up. A local sports promoter saw dollar signs and offered to host a charity exhibition match. All proceeds would go to wounded veterans. Sarah knew it was a trap. She also knew she could not say no. The weeks before the fight were a storm of noise and pressure. Every news outlet in the state wanted a piece of the story. Headlines screamed things like Housewife versus War Machine and SEAL Commander to put woman in her place. The comments online were worse. Men called her every name imaginable. Women told her she was setting the gender back 50 years. Even her own coach, Mac, sat her down and said she did not have to do this. He pointed out that Eric had 50 pounds of muscle on her, a longer reach, and years of killing experience. He said the smart thing was to walk away. Sarah listened quietly, then went back to training. She knew something that nobody else did. She had spent the last 6 months studying Eric's old fight videos from his military days. The man had a pattern. He always led with his right hand. He always dropped his left elbow when he got tired. He always leaned forward when he thought he had one. Sarah built her entire game plan around those 3 mistakes. The night before the match, she could not sleep. She sat in her small apartment, wrapping her hands in tape, and thought about her mother. She thought about every person who had ever told her she was not enough. She thought about the tree in her childhood backyard and the punching bag her father had made. Then she put her head down on the table and cried for exactly 5 minutes. When she looked up, her eyes were clear. She wrote a short note in her journal. Fear is just excitement without breath. Then she went to sleep. The next morning, she ate a simple breakfast of oatmeal and bananas. She did not check her phone. She did not look at the news. She simply walked out the door, got into her old truck, and drove to the arena. The parking lot was already full. Hundreds of people had come to watch her lose. The arena was loud, hot, and unforgiving. Sarah walked toward the cage wearing a plain black hoodie. The crowd was split between those who wanted to see a miracle and those who wanted to see a humiliation. Eric was already in the cage, shadowboxing with the confidence of a man who had never known defeat. He wore custom shorts with his seal trident stitched into the waistband. When he saw Sarah, he grinned and spread his arms wide, inviting the crowd to laugh. And they did. A wave of mocking cheers rolled through the seats. Sarah pulled off her hoodie and stepped into the cage. She did not look at Eric. She looked at the floor, then at her hands, then at the referee. The bell rang. For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. They circled each other like two wolves deciding who would bite first. Eric threw a jab. Sarah slipped it. He threw another. She caught it on her forearm and stepped back. The crowd grew impatient. They wanted blood. Then Eric made his first mistake. He got tired of waiting. He lunged forward with a big right hand, the same punch he had thrown 1,000 times before. Sarah was not there. She ducked under it and drove her shoulder into his ribs, pinning him against the cage. For a moment, Eric looked confused. This was not supposed to happen. He tried to shove her off, but she had already shifted her weight and was driving her forehead into his chest. He was stronger, but she was faster and smarter. She started working his body with short, brutal knees. Not to the head, where he expected, but to the ribs. The same ribs, over and over. Eric grunted and tried to spin away. That was his second mistake. He turned his back for half a second, and Sarah grabbed his arm, locked in a standing kimura, and wrenched. Something popped. Eric screamed. The referee jumped in, but Sarah had already let go. She stepped back, breathing hard, and watched as Eric dropped to one knee, holding his left side. His face was white. The crowd went silent. Then a single person started clapping, and soon the entire arena was on its feet. The aftermath was stranger than the fight itself. Eric was taken to the hospital with 2 broken ribs and a torn ligament in his shoulder. The doctors said he would be out of training for at least 6 months. Sarah walked out of the arena with her hoodie back on. No celebration, no speech. She found a quiet corner outside and sat on the curb. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sudden drop of adrenaline. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, walked up to her with her mother. The girl was crying. Sarah thought she was scared, but the girl threw her arms around Sarah's neck and whispered, "I want to fight too. They say I can't because I'm a girl. But now I know they're wrong." Sarah hugged her back and felt something crack open inside her chest. It was the first time she had cried since her mother died. The media narrative flipped overnight. The same outlets that had mocked her now called her a hero. Interview requests poured in. A movie producer offered her a 6-figure deal for her life rights. Sarah turned it all down. She went back to her apartment, hung her gloves on a hook by the door, and went to sleep. The next morning, she showed up at the forge at 5 a.m. like nothing had happened. Mac was already there. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. They never talked about the fight again. But things were different now. Young women started coming to the gym in droves. Mothers brought their daughters. Sarah did not become a celebrity or a motivational speaker. She became a coach. She started a free program for girls who could not afford training. She taught them the same things her father had taught her, that strength is not about size, it is about will. That fear is just a signal, not a stop sign. That the world will always try to put you in a box, but you do not have to stay there.